Hello and welcome back, everyone. Now, as the old saying goes, time flies when you talk climate adaptation. Am I right? Am I right?
Indeed.
Right, yes, incredibly, it is time for Vicky, Scheick and I to give you the very last CAS Talk of the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021. It's been an inspirational and very hopeful last day and a half. Lots of commitments have been made, but the question is, what is next? How do we go about accelerating towards climate adaptation globally? And to have that conversation, I have joining me the head of cabinet of the European Commission, Diederik Samsom, whose name has become synonymous with climate action, the executive secretary from the UNFCCC, responsible for global climate negotiations, Patricia Espinosa, the Vice Minister from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mexico, Martha Delgado, and sitting with us right here at the table, the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, Mr. Patrick Verkooyen, who must be exhausted. Please, tell us that.
Not only feel exhausted, but I also noticed from all the comments last night that I look exhausted.
Oh,
so that's absolutely true.
No.
Yes.
Just fishing for compliments. Fishing for compliments. Okay, good. Yeah, Vicky?
Yes, well, Sasha de Boer is tuning in with us. You just finished up the closing session. How did it go?
Well, I didn't have to do so much. I just closed it up because there was a panel discussion from Davos coming, and they said many inspiring things. But well, actually, what was very, very inspiring was to hear the last 22 hours, all these talks, all these inspiring things that leaders have shared with us. Like, for instance, the 30, I think it was 30 leaders that joined me in the opening session, and they were out. I got the feeling somewhere that we live in a global village. And in this global village, everybody takes care of each other. Everybody wants to help the most vulnerable people. So that gave me a really warm feeling.
Yeah, and apart from the global village stuff, Sasha, this must be a world journalist record. I mean, has anyone spoken to that many global leaders in one session? It's ridiculous.
I really don't know. It was a first for me too.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and all the best.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Okay, I'd like to introduce our first video speaker who's joining us, Mr. Samsom, Diederik Samsom. Are you available? Oh, I'm seeing a test screen. Yes, he is available. Great. Well, we can hear you. We can't see you in the studio, but nevertheless, we can definitely hear you. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question. There you are. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Now, as someone who's fighting to keep climate security at the very top of mind, top of political agendas everywhere, you must be fairly happy with this summit.
Yeah, and it actually feels like a little catching up, basically, because what we've seen so far is a lot of commitment on mitigation, so preventing climate change, and that's very important. And for instance, in the last Climate Action Summit, we really had a heap of, again, world leaders committing to climate neutrality and more ambition. But we have to acknowledge that climate change is happening and we need to adapt to it. So this summit really feels like the necessary catching up that climate adaptation needs to do. And I'm very happy that it's taking place, and I'm happy with the development so far.
Did it kind of exceed your expectations, or has everything been done as you expected?
Well, as you know, those summits as this are well prepared. So so far nobody has really surprised me, but that's a surprise in itself, because what normally happens is that some of the leaders don't show up, or they do show up and don't say anything relevant. And so far I haven't encountered that disappointment yet. So far so good. And obviously the real important stuff is what happens next. I mean, all the commitments that are made here and the the support that leaders are sharing verbally needs to be put into real action and real money.
Definitely, yeah. Showing up is key, and there's that old adage, of course, 80% of success is showing up. So if that's a test, then we're in a good position. Listen, let's go over to Mexico. Mrs. Delgado, if you're on the line. Yes,
Yes,
great.
I am.
Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Mrs. Delgado, there's a common awareness and readiness to act that is clear from the last day and a half. But what do you see as the most needed next step to sustain this momentum? How do we go about this?
Well, this is a tough question. Thank you very much for having us today. It is a privilege. For Mexico, it has been a pleasure for being part of this Climate Adaptation Summit, but not just because we are very, very interested in this agenda, but because we need to look at this agenda as how to manage the future challenges. So I want to celebrate this effort of the Global Adaptation Commission, resulting really in an extraordinary summit. All the attendants, we have learned a lot, but we are also opening new channels of communication. On a single next step, I think that we cannot mention one, but if we want to accelerate the adaptation efforts, we need to reach out further. So this is a challenge. Undoubtedly, this year we have engaged with many non-traditional stakeholders, finding opportunities to adapt our societies. Also finding the new ways of addressing climate change challenges, but there is much work ahead of us. So
can you give an example of the non-traditional stakeholders that we need to reach out to?
Yes, of course. For example, we are gathering a lot of groups which are right now engaged in different parts of the world, not in a formal, non-governmental organizations, but gathering together, contacting themselves together to really fight for causes that they are looking and they share. So also across different causes like climate change, social changes, health challenges, and economic problems, there are also communications that before we have never seen. So we can also right now try to understand how society is mixed it up as a global community. As our first commenter said, this global community is going to be a fundamental actor for the adaptation in the next years to come.
Thank you. And Mr. Sampson, is there something you'd like to add? What would you say is the next concrete step that you'd like to see?
Partnership and finance. And maybe starting with the finance, we need to step up to the plate. There's a lot of money needed to make the adaptation to climate change, especially in the developing world. There's commitment from the developed nations, but so far not everybody has lived up to that commitment. And as long as that doesn't happen, we have little to show for. And as soon as that money is on the table, and I hope in the run-up to Glasgow, the COP26, we will make that happen. As soon as that is on the table, we can start the real partnerships that are needed, sharing knowledge, sharing experience, sharing technology, to really adapt to, well, what is happening around us, which is called climate change.
Yeah. Vicky?
Yes, no, that was my question too. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. And we've also talked a lot about engaging the youth, Mrs. Delgado. I'm reliably informed that a good way to do that is to have a TikTok account. Do you have a TikTok account?
Not indeed.
What did you say? Not yet? Okay. But how would you recommend that we go about doing that? How is there anything you're using in the Mexican context to really reach out to the youth and engage them in climate adaptation solutions?
Well, I think that I have to start opening a TikTok account. But I think that we can reach the youth. Now, we have to reach them by raising awareness, but also raising hope, because they have in their houses studying for a long time, and maybe they have learned that contributing themselves to the society, it is important. In the past, before the pandemic, I think that maybe they were not really aware about the environmental or social challenges, and right now adaptation is a word that they I think that are interested on. So I think really that this cause will be one of the most important interests of youth in this current century, in the 21st century, and we need to engage them by giving them hope. And we are going to have to work very, very hard with Patrick and the Global Center for Adaptation in order for them to really get engaged in the solutions. And but we will have to be very smart, because they have to participate enthusiastically and not forced by the circumstances.
Absolutely, and that's a perfect bridge. Thank you very much, Mrs. Delgado, to our next speaker, who Vicky is going to introduce.
Yes. That is Tracy Fung. She is a young leader with the Global Center on Adaptation's Young Leader team. I can't see her on the screen yet, but yes, there she is. Good day to you, Tracy. Could you tell me a bit more about what a young leader does?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you, Vicky, for having me today. The Global Center on Adaptation hosts Young Leaders for Skills Development Initiative to build the capacity for the next generation of adaptation professionals. I am proud to be a part of the 6th cohort of young leaders, along with 7 others from around the world, and we work with GCA experts contributing to climate resilience, adaptation policy, advocacy, research efforts, gaining a better understanding of what adaptation is, and also gaining professional experience and strengthening our leadership skills. As a young leader, I've been working with the youth leadership team to help develop the youth leadership program, which was just launched last Friday, including its 6 action areas. We have the Youth Adaptation Network, the Adaptation Education and Jobs Training, Youth Adaptation Solutions Challenge, Young Leaders, which I'm a part of, Youth Participation in Adaptation Policy, and Young Women Leadership on Adaptation. I'd just like to say that it has been a privilege to be part of an amazing team and to have contributed to shaping the program and its action areas. And also, it has been an amazing experience so far, and I encourage any young person who is passionate and interested in climate change to take a look into the Young Leaders Initiative.
Good grief! This is a dream statement, and you're the boss. So, what's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tracy, for these kind words. But if you don't mind, I also would like to build on Diederik's points about the success of the summit,
Sure.
To share my reflection, and also thanking Marta for joining this conversation as well. I think what we have seen in the last 24 hours is something quite historic. Mm-hmm. And why is that? 3 things. 1, having world leaders talking about the importance of adaptation, just to appreciate this, has never happened before. No. It's the first time that world leaders discuss climate adaptation. And what did they do? They agreed that adaptation should be at the heart of the economic recovery from COVID. That is transformational. That's one. Secondly, since the inauguration of President Biden last week, the US is back in the Paris Agreement. That's critical in and of itself. But they chose this summit to re-engage with the international community on climate. That signaling effect is also critical. And the third piece is what the summit embraces is this is an all of society's effort. We didn't only see government leaders or mayors or the private sector. We also heard from 3,000 scientists who agreed on the importance of adaptation. We heard from thousands of young leaders indeed who said, okay, we're all in. We are aware, of course, of this Friday movement on climate action for quite some time, and it's critically effective. They spoke only about the mitigation side. Now they say, you know what? Let's also deal in adaptation. But if you're living on the front line, your question might be, okay, there is a summit, and it might be historic for those three things, but how does it impact my livelihood on a daily basis, whether you're living in Accra, Ghana, or in Bangladesh, in Dhaka? And I think the outcomes, and just to build on Diederik's points, are truly action forcing. Why three things again? I mean, but just to make that point, but just to appreciate that point, having Kristalina Georgieva yesterday committing the IMF to mainstream climate change into everything what they do, that basically means climate proofing the global financial system. Having Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, saying from now on our climate finance will be 50-50. There is no other bilateral donor who has committed that. Having President Adesina committing 12.5 billion for Africa alone and fundraising for another 12.5 billion, those are tangible, concrete outcomes.
Yeah. And
when did it happen?
The French as well.
Precisely.
With committing a third of their financing towards
$1.5 billion.
Yep. Mr. Sampson, what's the game plan to put the Adaptation Action Agenda at the top of people's minds? That's what's the deliverable out of this summit. So how do we really get that?
Okay. Well, let's start at home, because this is an all-encompassing question. So we will come up with our own adaptation strategy, and when I say we, I mean the European Union, which is quite a large bloc in the world. That will happen at the end of February, in which we will outline our activities on climate adaptation, both at home and abroad, so both within the EU as in the rest of the world. Obviously, we have a lot to do within the EU too. Climate change is not something from far away down in Africa or in Southeast Asia. It's here and around us, also here in the EU. So we need to speed up our action. We need to concentrate on nature-based solutions. That's really the way to go to adapt to climate change. And we need to partner with the rest of the world in order to share our knowledge, but also to learn from them. This is a collective effort. And as I said, our first step onto this battlefield is our own climate adaptation strategy, which will update the one that was somewhere very obsolete.
In a drawer somewhere in an office,
Yeah, somewhere. And now with the Green Deal, obviously everything around climate has a much higher political profile and also more momentum within the European political sphere. So we certainly expect that climate adaptation will also get that political momentum.
Yeah. And Mrs. Delgado, how, on a personal note, tell us, how much of a relief was it to see the US really back in the game, stepping up to the plate and accepting their responsibility, signing up to the Paris Agreement?
As a matter of fact, I think that sign will robust all the climate agenda around the world, because we all understand that this country is very important. They are the main contributor to the GHG emissions around, and finally getting them back in the Paris Agreement will really have this agenda as a priority in the next years. We need to understand that the pandemic has affected a lot the public policies. So the fact that the climate change and all the Paris Agreement commitments are in the mainstream of the U.S. is very important for all the countries around the world.
Thank you. And Vicky, for you, you've been a youth reporter at large throughout the last day and a half. I know you're optimistic about everything that you've been hearing. What's your next step? What are you going to tell people straight after this summit?
Well, first of all, I'm going to tell them that there are a lot of commitments made by global leaders. And of course, that 18,000 people have registered for this Climate Adaptation Summit. So there were so many people that watched those sessions about climate adaptation. And I think, that is very exciting and impressive.
Yeah, now great. And Mrs. Espinosa, are you online? Yes, there she is. Mrs. Espinosa, thank you again for joining us. We were just talking. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Great. From your point of view, I mean, I loved the interaction yesterday at the opening when you were also talking about how happy you were to see the US back and re-engaging John Kerry. Secretary General Gutierrez was next to you, took off his glasses, he was smiling. It seems like a really positive step, like the stars are aligning. We've got these leaders all making these commitments.
That's correct. We are really looking forward with a lot of hope for this year. This is going to be the conference, the most important conference, I would say, since the adoption of the Paris Agreement. It is a conference that is, in addition, as everybody has said and underlined, it is taking place in a context of really extraordinary situation all over the world, and where countries are also looking at consequences, economic, social consequences of the pandemic. So in a way, I think that normally you would think that these two big crises coming together is bad news. And yes, it is bad news because it has, we're seeing so much suffering from COVID, but also from climate change. At the same time, I think paradoxically, the coming together of the two crises are creating a unique opportunity for our generation. I think this generation has a very unique opportunity to make the right decisions and to really contribute to shaping a better future for generations to come. So it is going to be a very challenging year. It is good that we have all these positive commitments and positive political will, but it does mean anyway that hard work lies ahead of us. And I do want to thank you for this summit, because it has highlighted the critical importance of adaptation, and we need adaptation results at COP26 as well.
Thank you for those candid but also inspirational words. There is a lot of work for us to do, but there is hope. More hope is also offered by the Secretary General of the Global Commission on Adaptation, Ban Ki-moon, and he recorded a final thought for us.
As the world continues to tackle COVID-19 pandemic, this summit represents an opportunity to reflect on how the countries and communities around the world can recover better, recover stronger, and recover together from this crisis. In that regard, this summit is also incredibly important. 5 years ago, world leaders gathered in the French capital city to sign the Paris Agreement on climate change, an historic accord that commits every nation to expedite the transition to a zero-carbon, resilient, and sustainable future. I still feel it personally a great honor to be among the world's leaders at the time who were united for the future of our humanity and our planet Earth. In the years since, during the last 5 years, I'm also proud to say that the Paris Agreement has fundamentally reshaped the landscape for how we address the global climate crisis, catalyzing unprecedented actions by governments, companies, investors, cities, and citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to do more. 2020 was a year of surging heat, intensifying drought, and rampant wildfires. And while the year ahead will be defined by our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, the centuries ahead will be defined by how green that recovery actually is. I'm deeply concerned that a review of domestic stimulus plans found that dirty measures that will increase our carbon emissions outnumbered green initiatives 4-1. We must remember there is no vaccine to fix our changing climate. And as climate impacts continue to intensify, we must put adaptation on an equal footing with mitigation. Climate change is happening now. It's happening much, much faster than we may feel and than may we think, causing cascading risk and impact alongside the fallout from COVID-19. Building resilience to climate impact is not a nice to have. It is a must. It's a must if we are to live in a sustainable and secure world.
Great inspirational words again from Mr. Ban Ki-moon there. I'd like to put all of our speakers on the spot for a minute. When it comes to climate adaptation, what is the first next thing that you're going to do? What's the first phone call you're going to make? What's the first email you're going to send? Choose one thing. Let's go first to Mrs. Delgado.
Well, I think that right now we must seize the opportunity to invest wisely in climate adaptation and foster new innovative financial instruments. And we cannot do it by ourselves. We need to build and create strong partnerships. And I want to mention that and to highlight that recently was launched the report Green and Resilient Recovery for Latin America, prepared by the Global Center, and a few days ago was launched by also the Foreign Affairs Minister with the presidency of CELAC, of the Community of Latin America and the Caribbean states. So that provides recommendations on how to build resilience to address the social, the climatic and health crisis led by COVID-19, and we need to follow up on that specific initiative. And
so that'll be your first email.
Work together with all countries. Exactly.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Delgado. Diederik Samsom, tell me, what's your first phone call, or your first email, or your first tweet?
To a few representatives of the Friday for Futures movement, because now they are embarking on the climate adaptation too. And I know from experience what a huge difference they have made in climate mitigation, in our climate action. I mean, the European Green Deal would not have been there if it was not for that movement to take the streets, but also the kitchen table, talking to their parents, some of them having influence. And here we are. So if they now take the second step and also embark on this journey to fight climate change by adaptation, I'm certainly going to reach out to them, because they are hugely important for creating and sustaining the momentum that we need.
I like that, very concrete. You're setting up a WhatsApp group and you're apping a few world leaders. Mrs. Espinosa, what is your next step, please?
Next step right here with you. And my next step is making a call to all leaders for climate finance, financing for the national adaptation plans. We need to get that done. And that is in the interest of each and every nation in the world.
Thank you very much for joining us. And it's a good next step. Tracy, our penultimate guest, before I go to Mr. Fukuya.
Thank you. My next step will be sharing and encouraging everyone to share the Global Youth Call to Action on Adaptation that was presented on Friday. This was developed by hundreds and thousands of youth from all over the world, from 120 countries, and they really kind of gathered what the youth need, a decade of action. And I hope that many will start implementing the needed actions for the decade. And hopefully we'll take this to the COP in November as an important and integral contribution to the negotiations, and further stressing the importance of youth leadership and young voices in the climate agenda moving forward.
Very clear. You're also going to be very busy sending emails, sounds like. Thank you very much for joining us, Tracy. Now, Mr. Fukuya, the Mayors Forum, the Ministerial Dialogues, Climate Adaptation Summit, you've led the team that's put all of this together. I think congratulations are in order. You must be a happy man.
It's a good question. In fact, I was thinking about your question, what's my next action?
I'll ask, I want to know that.
But because that next action took place last night.
Oh,
after the leaders segment, because there is no time to waste. I called President Adesina because together we launched this Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, where we committed to mobilize an additional $12.5 billion US dollars to be put on the table. So I said to him, how are we going to put this on the agenda of the G7? How are we going to get this delivered comes COP26? Because I'm thinking of my last visit to Africa just before COVID, when I went to Western Kisumu in Kenya, thinking about that mother who couldn't put food on the table because the rains didn't come. So there is an incredible sense of urgency here on this agenda. Yes, this was a very successful, as I said in the beginning, an historic summit. But at the end of the day, we have to deliver on the ground. And we have to raise now from the ashes of the COVID crisis. And we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get it right. It's up for us to seize it.
Now, very clear and ambitious. But on a personal note, what's it been like for you the last day and a half? A lot of Zoom calls, a lot of stress, or you've been
well, a lot of engagements, of course. I mean, as Diederik said, there were not perhaps too many surprises. But I mean, having these leaders coming forward, not just to show up at a summit, but to come with concrete commitments and plans and actions. That's incredibly important, and that's never a given. Now we need to keep all of ourselves honest to deliver on this, and that's exactly where the Global Center on Adaptation comes in, because we as an international organization, we are being put on the table to follow up on all these commitments and to scale and replicate adaptation action across the globe. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smartest thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another classic saying, I seem to be the sayings guy, but a summit is only as successful as its legacy. So let's hope that the legacy of this will be extremely successful. Just before we wrap up and show our highlight video, what's your next step?
My next step? Well, I'm going to read all the articles that the Youth Report has produced, because there are 50 articles that they produced in the last couple of days, so 50. That will be interesting.
But I have also a question for you.
Oh, no.
Yes.
We've run out of time.
No, because I have a question for the journalists, which is critically important. What will they report on in the next few weeks? Will they stay on this topic, or do they move to the other sort of topic?
Very good question.
My request to the media worldwide is stay on this topic. Keep reporting on this, because we also need you to really put a light on the importance of this agenda.
Well, as spokesperson for every journalist in the world and every journalistic institution, I can tell you, we will.
Good.
What a commitment. Okay, that is it, folks. We have produced a short video wrap-up showing the highlights of the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021, which I hope you enjoy.
The human being is the smartest and more ingenious creature living on planet Earth, and yet it's the only one capable of destroying its own planet.
If we don't adapt, the consequences will be disastrous.
We need the voices of young people. we are also the ones that are going to face this crisis, for the rest of our lives probably.
This is the battle of our lifetime.
Significantly more money and funding is needed.
And use this summit as a turning point to create a more prosperous, greener and fairer world.
So the task ahead is vast. We will need to shift the immense power of the market away from destruction and towards sustainability.
The future is now.
Tackle this great challenge of climate change, we need all hands on deck.
The leaders today have the power to shape a better future for our planet.
我们生活在同一个地球村。
Il en va de notre responsabilité à tous et de notre responsabilité à chacun.
2021 be the year that we fight back.
Certainly collaboration is a key part of this.
The future is now.
President Biden has made fighting climate change a top priority of his administration.
Many world leaders with such powerful commitments. I can only be very happy with that.
We need to start building a better future now.
The future is now.
Oh, there's one of those goosebumps videos. Now, thank you very much, everyone. Continue to act. Continue to work. We need to put in the work. As a global community, we need to adapt to our changing climate. We must, we can, and we will. Thank you very much.